Wonderful. Nice to see you. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Ivo?
Very, very well. That was a great week. So nice to have a bit of time to sit down and chat.
Nice.
How are you?
Very good. I think definitely a good week, but I'm wiped out. It was really long, and I think we're all so tired. But yeah, quite excited to start Saturday, just having a nice chat, and yeah, I think the rest of my day is going to be sitting on the sofa reading a book, to be honest.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. We really, I think, need a bit of time off as well from doing all of this stuff. So yeah, so great that we find a bit of time, even if it's on a Saturday, with all of the business, all of the busy things going on. And I'm really curious. Like, let's get into the depth of what exactly you're doing with Trace in a bit. But like with, I'm seeing that there's so many things going on with Trace, and I'm curious just to hear a bit from you. How are you experiencing what is going on right now in the field of regenerative fiber production and fashion?
Yeah, so I think it's a really exciting moment because this is starting to be talked about and brands are starting to take action. Like when we started working in 2019, this was like not a thing. There was like complete radio silence about the role that fashion has to play in regenerative agriculture. And now suddenly in the last year, since like 2020, you can see these really big, powerful brands realizing that reducing externalities is not enough and starting to pledge commitments to include regenerative agriculture in their supply chains. And that's so important, right? Because like fashion plays such a big role in our farming systems and we don't talk about that. And obviously, with the environmental toll of the industry, damaging less is not enough. And so, I mean, it's definitely an exciting moment. I think what I'm very curious about, and I'm really hoping that this 2021 is now the year for that, is that we start to see a little bit more of like collaboration around fashion brands setting shared goals and shared commitments, and also measuring what actually we're doing through regenerative farming, finding ways to measure those impacts and to monitor them and to commit to improve them. Because it's quite, as you well know, I feel like it's very difficult to create change if we are all working individually with individual farms. And it's also much easier to bring farmers and help them transition towards regenerative practices when we have like joint purchasing power and a joint commitment of like, we will be able to buy these fabrics from you, whereas if we are all working individually, that all becomes much more difficult.
Yeah, and we like the farmers need the security that this is not something that they will produce that is going to be of amazing value, but also of a lot of cost for them, and actually see that there's a demand for this, and it's super cool to see that that changes are happening in this direction. Do you have any thoughts on why that is? Like what has happened in that sector?
I mean, so I think the fashion industry has a lot of really committed people when it comes to, helping the environment or, it's kind of like stopping this massive damage that we're doing. And I think it's just like a common evolution of the thinking, and like to me, it's common sense that when we look at our climate targets, it's impossible that we will achieve them by just reducing emissions a little bit. And when you look at the emissions of the fashion industry, you realize that it's just not possible, right? Like, I mean, obviously we need to stop producing all clothes today. And then that still wouldn't like really help us get there. So as I think there's been this conversation on environmental regeneration pioneered by so many people outside of fashion for many years, and the data is starting to be so evident that we need to do stuff to increase our soil fertility, repair our soils, sequester carbon from the atmosphere, and that agriculture is one of the ways that we can do that. I think it's just been about people connecting the dots. I actually don't think there's been like one joining force in the fashion industry that has been bringing in, players around the table to talk about it. But I think it's been different brands realizing at different times that they had to do it. And of course, there's the Savory Institute did launch land to market program where they work on, just putting products sourced from regenerative farming into the market. And as part of that, they have a fashion, like little cluster that is mostly with leather because they do a lot of cattle farming. That's their focus area. And they got on board Aileen Fisher and Timberland and different big players there. So I think that really pushed the conversation, the lunch market initiative. Yeah, exactly. Right. And other brands checking it out. I mean, like,
it's funny, like, obviously, people don't know, but we both have this background of working in social impact, right? And met over the years several times of working like on different conferences and talking about, systemic change and stuff. And it's funny because we both in the last couple of years got into regenerative agriculture. And sort of while it was still relatively unknown, right? Like as you're saying, like in fashion, like in food, this has the interest for this has exploded in the last 12 months and the last time. I'm curious, what was it for you, like that a couple of years ago you decided to leave what you were doing and get into this?
Yeah. Well, as you know, I was working at Ashoka, which was really the journey of a lifetime. I loved it and I learned so much. But a deep frustration that I had within me was that Ashoka is sector agnostic, so I kept working on programs in different sectors where I learned a lot, but my passion has always been the environment. And I was like, there was this thing inside of me that was building up about the fact that I wasn't working on this issue that I thought was our generation's issue. It was like the mother of all issues, because if we fail at this, like everything else is over. And also it connects so much with issues such as, social justice, like everything comes back to the climate. So I really wanted to, I got to this moment where I was like, I want to focus my life on working on environment, at least for a while, when I looked at my life, I've always been like, I really try to live as sustainably as possible. And I've done this for the past years when it comes to my diet, to my purchasing habits, to like so many things. And fashion was like this nut that I just couldn't crack, like I think who always consider myself a really aware consumer, I didn't understand the impact that fashion has until very recently, like say 3 or 4 years. And I was like, oh my goodness, how is this, how is this a thing? How are we not talking more about this? And how I didn't, never really thought about it. And the more I got into fashion and I got to understand the really heavy impacts that it has, the more I realized that one, I just couldn't get the information that I wanted from brands, like there was like this deep lack of transparency where, like it was impossible for consumers to understand their impacts because brands themselves don't understand their impacts generally because they are very opaque supply chains. But then I also started to see that, it's when it came about, I started learning about nature-based solutions to climate change. And I started to see this huge potential of an industry that has like one of the, what for me is possibly like the widest reaching supply chain in the planet, in terms of how it's connected and how many millions of people does it touch in all the stages. And I was like, well, okay, so this is terrible. And it seems like, like the solution cannot just be to damage less because like we are producing clothes that we don't need, like then the solution should be to stop producing clothes. But it seems like there is a way for the industry and actually to champion regenerative agriculture, and to place itself at a point where, in my opinion, the industries of the future will need to figure out how they are contributing to solving our climate and other social goals. And if they are not contributing like positively, we shouldn't be putting new products into the world, new products that we don't need. And I feel like fashion was this clear representation of something that, today is in a very bad place, but actually can become a really big force for good when it comes to the environment if we get rigorous about how we are growing our textile, our natural fibers. So yeah, it was like connecting to dots.
Yeah, no, and so many thoughts and additional questions. And just I think one thing that I thought was really cool what you just said is this sort of where we're all trying to sort of be as sustainable as we can and damage less, right? And I think this revolutionary thought with regenerative work that we can go beyond that, right? Like we have this idea of sustainability being we have to reduce and we have to like stop producing clothes altogether, and that actually this is not what makes sense. This is even not going to save us, right? Like even if we reduce all the way, if even like whether that is sort of on an individual, on a national or on an international level, this is not even going to save us anymore. So like we have to go beyond this. And I think this is so, like for me personally, this is so inspiring to this whole thing that there's a way that we can actually, improve the world, improve ourselves, improve our surroundings by being conscious how we choose stuff, and informing ourselves and like also asking, requesting, demanding from the brands that we're working with, to give us this information. And so sorry, there's just okay. So before we go a couple of other things, I'm curious because you've also thought a lot about change with your work with Ashoka, and I'm wondering what is within the fashion industry what you see as sort of the necessary leverage points to make it regenerative. What are your thoughts there?
So it's interesting because I was thinking a lot about this on Tuesday. I mean, I think once a week about this very deeply. And so I think there are two things, and it makes me really conflicted to say them because I am a very big advocate of consumer power, and I will always be, I think. But I think obviously we can't place all the responsibility on consumers when there are like such heavy market forces guiding our purchasing decisions, So while we as consumers have individual power to create a lot of change, and so many consumers are doing that through demand, it's not realistic to think that just everybody is going to make that switch by their own, or like with awareness or with. So the two things that I think are really core is one is legislation. So I actually think we need government intervention in the fashion industry, like really urgently. And this should have happened years ago because, I mean, on so many levels, right? And what fashion is mostly talked about is because of human rights abuses. But to me, it's shocking that as society, we accept buying products that were made by people in situations of modern slavery, and nobody is legislating that because it's like kind of like the problem is elsewhere. But it's fluffy, but it's not that elsewhere. It's there, and there's proof, and there's like but it's like,
and that's the direct impact that I have on it, right?
Yeah, and but governments keep like shunning the responsibility of putting rules on companies on how they need to operate. And obviously when we think about the environment, it's so common sense that what it's happening with fast fashion, we need to tax this because this is a burden that as society we are going to have to carry for a long time, and other activities that are damaging for human health are taxed. So like why wouldn't fast fashion be taxed? And so I think like legislation is something that needs to happen. Actually, I don't know if you saw, but a bunch of US organizations are now asking President Biden to create like a fashion secretariat, that will really work on putting some order on fashion companies and, fashion trade in the States, which is something I'm really hopeful for. But we need the same thing in Europe. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is, I think it's certification, and especially when it comes to regenerative agriculture. And I think certification is a double-edged sword. And so for example, for us, when it comes to organic certification, we do buy some fabrics that are not got certificates, because we know that the farmers are not using any pesticides, but they are not they are not certified. So certification is complex, because it's as a system, it means that today being sustainable is more expensive than not being sustainable, and you need to pay to be certified, and you need to pay for the inspections, and you need to pay for everything. But where things are at today, I think we need, like some certificate that we can use as a fashion industry to really monitor, like what is regenerative and what its impact. And I think certification is the easiest way to do that. And then we can think about, what are the market incentives, and like, again, how does that link to the fact that governments need to support this process? But I think those two things are really key.
Yeah. I mean, this is what we're seeing, obviously, in the food area as well, right? Like, there's, and I mean, I'm curious about the name of like Trace Collective and Trace Planet, because like the word that I was just having in mind is like we need to be able to trace throughout the supply chain, how much positive impact is happening. Like this is what needs to be clearly shown, and basically if the impact is negative, then well, that shouldn't be a possibility, right? Really. So I mean, this is to some degree what we're working on with climate farmers, to actually enable a low effort, low cost. It's not really a certificate, but a way to monitor what is happening on the ground, without the farmer having to pay for soil testing and for inspection, etc. They are not really effective in any case. So. So completely agree there. I'm curious about if you would like just to hear a bit from the farmer's perspective, from the producer's perspective, like because I think it's a topic that is relatively little talked about, fiber production, especially in Europe, I feel. How do you see sort of the feedback or the interest from farmers to pick that up?
Yeah, so it's quite mixed, and I also explain where we are at on that process. So I think farmers are very so for the most part right now we're working with farmers that are already like growing, so when we arrived they were already doing this, and so there is like so much enthusiasm to have their work valued, and kind of like displayed as a role model and as something that makes sense. I think with other conversations where we are like really trying to go on the journey with farmers, to make that transition, I think what we also see is like a lot of grief among farmer communities, because it is very difficult to be a farmer today, and it's very difficult to make a living with that, and it's difficult to manage conversations in a way where it's easy to make it understood that we are on their side and we're trying to support them, like create a more resilient model, and we're trying to bring in other players from the industry that we like commit these orders. So that's why I'm so eager on like having, this regenerative pledge that we talked about, where we can really be like, listen, we commit to this, we commit to buying like these thousands of kilograms of yield from you. Let's do this process together, because otherwise, like, it's a big ask. And I think there's a lot of, there's resistance to change, but there's also fear, like in so many countries, agricultural policies have been so volatile. And especially, right now, the fashion industry, like purchasing orders have like collapsed last year, when it comes to fabric, so much of production was stopped. So it is a difficult moment to start conversations with people about, like going on that journey.
What before, like, I would love to hear a bit more about the Regenerative Pledge if you would like to talk about that. But before, like, which textiles and fibers are you working with, or are you producing in Europe?
Yeah, so we are working with linen and with hemp at the moment, and we are really, wanting to tackle cotton this year. But cotton is a very hairy industry, as you will know. So we've been avoiding it until now. And linen and hemp, I mean, in a way, we're starting at the easiest place of the industry. That was very much our intention, because they are crops that are very, I mean, by default almost, not always, but by default, they are grown regeneratively. They're always like grown as rotational crops, and they don't need any pesticides and need very little water. And, it's like, and they are already actually, that's a little bit how I started like looking into this area. When I was looking at scientific studies on soil impacts of different crops, you could see how linen and hemp really like increase soil biodiversity over time. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting, And so, I mean, they're very good crops. But that said, hemp is actually a very challenging crop, and we're having a lot of trouble when it comes to transparency. So we don't know what, I mean, there are some common assumptions of why that is, no? Because hemp was really repressed and prosecuted both in Europe and in the US for many decades. But it's very difficult to get the degree of transparency and access to farmers that we need. So we're pivoting for the third time our hemp strategy at the moment, because it's a very complex industry, and it's grown differently.
And I'm also imagining there's probably still relatively few farmers producing that for the textile industry, I would imagine, no?
Yeah, well, yes, and it's mostly in Eastern Europe, and it's mostly small scale, very small, very small scale farms that, it's difficult for us to connect with our supply chain because of, getting the right weaved fabric, or then it's very opaque, so it's kind of like you go through a middleman that is obviously the mill that you buy from, and it's like really complex to, I don't know, it's like I keep being surprised. I think we should have like a hemp talk one day and bring together everybody that is like trying to get to transparency, because I've talked to different fashion brands and that see transparency in the same way as us, and everybody is at the same place. And I'm so curious as of why, because obviously this happened. So we had this problem with all our fabrics, no? Like a lot of people don't want to give you the transparency that you want. But in all, all the so for example, in linen, we did find, like a few suppliers that were keen on doing this with us. But with hemp, it just seems to be impossible, and it's also very unclear why. Like it's like
so
there's some dark secret, which I'm sure there isn't, but like just
very interesting, because it, as you said, like it seems like a sort of like a very obvious choice for natural fiber. I mean, let's definitely sort of continue working on, because it's something that would be, I think it's sort of one of these areas within the agricultural field that most farmers probably wouldn't consider if there is sort of this clear demand for it, this might be much more attractive.
But I think the problem must be, so we actually had a very deep, honest, difficult but also beautiful in a way conversation with our hemp supplier last week, and I think part of what they are really struggling with is he's been doing these hemp fabrics for the past 30 years, and the farmers that he works with have been doing this for all his life. And apparently now there is like a lot of demand for hemp seeds for other products. Okay, like CBD, and I mean, I think some other stuff. And so it's a market that has become very popular suddenly, and where a lot of like young people are trying to break in, very large margins, you know. So apparently there is a lot of protectiveness and fear, because that is raising the prices of the seeds for them, and it's making, you know, a little bit their livelihood more difficult. And I don't know the full details about it, but I think part of this protectiveness comes from the fact that hemp is now, you know, becoming more en vogue for
over the
other
last couple of years.
And for other non-textile uses.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, probably also something that will change over time while, you know, the market sort of arrives at age maturity. Okay, so I'm curious about this regenerative pledge that you're planning. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, we want to wait a little bit until we have like all the you know, details in place. But I mean, to this most basic thing is basically bringing industry players together to commit to getting percentage of the production from regenerative agriculture. And what we're working on that is a little bit more complex is the different pathways that we can enable them to do that. No, so because if you go to a large fashion brand that often doesn't really have full visibility across their supply chains, and ask them to commit to this, and you don't provide them support to do that, it's pretty much impossible that they are able to do that, because they don't have direct relation with their farmers. So we're working on like different avenues, you know, and different levels of support that together with other organizations we can give to help the brands that don't have that access right now to be able to commit to this. But really the idea is that, you know, as an industry, we are able to commit, you know, and join forces around, to some extent, around sourcing, you know. So we go back to the conversation that we had at the beginning. So we can go to some farms and be like, will you like walk this journey with us? Will you make this transition? These are our minimum orders that we will place. And there is like a very clear financial incentive to transition. Because obviously what we want to give visibility and elevate the people who are already doing it, but the ultimate goal is to get more people to grow this way, right? And we think like a coalition is important to get that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Really looking forward to that. I think there's so much potential there.
I think so.
And so, okay, so there's we have Trace Collective and we have Trace Planet, right? If I get that well, then sort of most of what we've been speaking about so far is mostly sort of in the non-profit charitable part, which is Trace Planet. Is that correct?
Trace Planet is the non-profit, yeah.
And then on the other side, there's Trace Collective, where can you describe a bit what you're doing there?
Yeah, so I mean, not everything. A lot of what we've been talking about is Trace Collective. So we can go into that now. But so Trace Collective is our fashion brand, and that's when we started working. My business partner and I, we never thought we would set up a fashion brand. We wanted to create change in the fashion industry, but we weren't sure how. And to me, the more natural place to do it because of my background. My background felt like a charity. And so, but what we realized is that no brand was doing this, you know, especially when we started. Like I say, right now, some brands are starting to source regeneratively, a little bit, have a few pieces. But what we wanted to do was basically a brand that only produced clothes sourced from regenerative agriculture. It was like, why would we do anything else? No, it seemed clear that that's what we wanted. And so that's why we created Trace Collective. And actually all our work started through Trace Collective, through the brand. So Trace is a fashion brand whose single mission is to drive environmental regeneration through the fashion industry. And we do that in 3 ways. One is by sourcing fabrics that come from regenerative agriculture. And then 2, we produce fully circular products and fully biodegradable pieces. And circularity was something that came in very early on when we realized that we really had to monitor, you know, like if we were going to put new produce into the world, because we thought this was the way, we had to make sure that we minimize to the maximum the negative externalities. And so as part of that, we work a little bit different. So we do sell our clothes, but we also rent them, and we offer a take-back scheme if somebody after 2 years is like, oh, change my style, don't want to wear this anymore. And we also offer like a for-life repair guarantee. And, you know, and we keep innovating to figure out what are ways to get the clothes to be used for as long as possible before being disposed. And then thirdly, we are radically transparent, which means that any customer or any potential customer in their labels, and also in our website, they can go and see for each of our pieces, like this dress that I'm wearing, you can see exactly where it comes from farm to mills to the factory where it was produced, and click on the stories. And then also you can see the exact impacts when it comes to CO2 emissions, water used, and energy used. And also you can see the production costs, which for us was really important, because obviously a lot of people are like, well, your clothes are so expensive. And we're like, yeah, I know, but this is literally how much it costs to produce it. So we were quite keen on having our production costs displayed to start a conversation on what's behind the clothes that we buy at H&M.
I just have to move a bit.
No problem. No problem. Yeah. So that's Trace, and it's a fashion brand. It's a for-profit, but it has a pretty heavy mission lock in place because it's owned by Trace Planet, the charity.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, that's a huge commitment from your side, right? Like to really make this completely transparent, show all of this information. That's super cool. And I don't know, like right now, like you're starting with hemp linen, and is your plan to extend this in the future to also work with other fibers? I mean, you already said cotton, but are you planning to go beyond that?
No, because there are no other textile fibers that are grown in farms.
Oh, interesting.
So, you know, so that's kind of like, that's about it. So, I mean, we obviously this is our core, right? And it's regenerative agriculture is what we want to do, and it's kind of why we exist. I think then there is a part of like, I don't know, will we ever want to design other kinds of products that cannot be designed with these fabrics? And I don't know, the question, I think it's open. Cotton for sure is a must be. We've also been looking into seaweed fibers because it's exactly kind of the same that we're trying to do on land, but on oceans, which are actually the world's largest like carbon sinks, you know? So using seaweed fiber, but we've been working on this for like about 1.5 years, and we just cannot really find a seaweed fiber that has the properties that we need, you know, and the component of seaweed that we want. Like when you like sisal or other seaweed fibers have like 5% seaweed, and it's like, well, when something has like 5% something, is not like, you know, if my orange juice has 5% orange and 90% banana, is not an orange juice. So it's quite difficult with seaweed fibers, but that's something that we would be interested in for sure. But that's kind of for us, I think, the end of the journey. I think there are other fabrics that I think have a very important role to play in the fashion industry. So for example, recycled polyester, which has its own negative externalities when it comes to microfabrics and like, but I think it's definitely an important fabric that needs to grow. But it's not what we do, and it's not our thing.
And
so I would say
fiber is something you're not considering?
So wool would be an option. As of now, we are a vegan brand, and I think we're going to remain that way for a while. But definitely, wool has also, you know, it's a very interesting fiber to enjoy, to explore when it comes to regenerative farming. Yeah, and I think we would never work with leather.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating debate around it. So I was curious.
I mean, ultimately, it's about choosing your own path, right? And I think each brand has their own, you know, like it's human, no? You have your own like guiding principles, and it doesn't mean they're better or worse than others, you know, as long as they're thought through and you understand why you're making decisions, that's fine. For us, it seems like the path is this one right now.
Yeah, it's no, like it's a debate that I'm sort of following, and I always think like, well, taking a conscious choice is the point, right? Like if for you the choice is to step out of this whole industry, that seems like a perfectly fair thing to do. If you're going to participate, then it's about really sourcing properly, even right as an individual, as a company. And I think it is so fair to say this is not something we want to get involved in.
Yeah, exactly.
And okay, so I'm sort of as a maybe in concluding, I'm curious, like with all of this change happening in the last years, like all of this this picking up speed, and what are the changes that make you most optimistic, or what are you most positive about, that what motivates you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it takes us to where we started, right? The fact that this is picking momentum in the industry, and that big players are starting to talk about environmental regeneration is what makes me most optimistic, because realistically, I very much hope that more people will get to know about what we do, and like our mission and like our brand, and we will grow and grow, because at some point I hope that everybody copies our model, in a way that fashion is regenerative, but the fact that North Face or obviously Patagonia and like any big industry players, Organic Basic is doing it now, like obviously Eileen Fisher has been doing it for so many years, are having this conversation is much more impactful right now than we having this conversation. So that makes me super optimistic. And I think, I really think for a long time, I think if you want to work on climate, or if you want to work on anything, you need to be an optimist, right? Because otherwise, like stuff won't happen. But for a while, to me, it was difficult to be optimistic about climate. It was more, I'm optimistic about society being able to make this as less bad as possible, but it's not going to be pretty. And then when I started working on regeneration, I feel like I really gained that deep optimism of like, we are on time to obviously the world has changed drastically and we are never going back on that, but we are on time to get to like a balance that works for humans and for other animals, and that what makes me excited is more people also getting to know about this, that we can all play a part in this movement, and that it's beautiful, really. Like we can reverse a lot of the damage, and we have an opportunity, and this wasn't clear a few years ago. So let's jump on it, and
and it's like this potential of actually that maybe sort of we had to get really into the deep difficult situation, and having messed up properly, to realize and maybe reverse course 180 degree and turn this around, and really build like sort of the vision that I personally have for our work, beyond sort of the more specifics of regenerative agriculture and scaling regenerative agriculture. In the end, we need to build a world where humans and nature work together, right? Like and can really be in the same place. Like we have built this over the last 10,000 years. We have built this world in which wherever humans are, nature can't be. But then there's more and more humans, so there's less and less space for nature. And this is not going to work. So we need to create these spaces where, at the same place where we are, we give space to all other life. And I'm incredibly sort of energized by this idea. And then like I'm while you were talking, I was thinking about this quote that is, hope is a word with its sleeves rolled up, right? Like being optimistic is not knowing it's all going to be fine. Like we sit back and all is going to be fine. Like I'm guessing that this is similar for you. Like we're optimistic, because, you know, in the end, we're all doing it. And if we can get more people involved to do this with us, there's a real potential. If we all get everybody together, right?
Yeah. No, but absolutely. And it's like this vision that you're mentioning is so inspiring and resonates so much, no? Because it's like, I don't know, we humans have built so many amazing things, you know, like we can build this, you know, we can change our economies and build different models that are healing, you know, healing to the planet, but also healing to us right now, you know, to all the division and to all the pain and to all the grief. But we can do this. And I think, market models is a way to do it, and fashion definitely has a role to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for the conversation. Really looking forward to next week, Tuesday, to go more into depth.
Looking forward. Cool. Thank you so much, Ivo. Have a great weekend.
Yes, you too. And get